Hello, today we're going to talk about the different types of stalkers. If you got a copy of the book that you and follow along, you could look in chapter 2 where we discuss that. Now, we're going to talk about all the different variety of stalkers that are in that chapter, but today we're only going to talk about 3 of the primary stalkers that classifications that we've come up with. But another thing that's come up, getting contacted on my website in regards to the thing that you're seeing at the end of each one of these segments where it says my website and where you can contact me, and also it shows Duckworks Criminal Consulting LLC. Well, that's my company, and people are asking, as a lot of people do, why do you call it Duckworks? Well, my nickname is the Duck, and you can see on my hat here, it's got I had a duck drawn up for me, and it says Duckworks Criminal Consulting. A lot of my shirts have that, and hats and stuff that I give to people during certain times when I'm out there lecturing and teaching, and that is a gift. My nickname is the Duck. I got that when I was working homicide, and my partner's nickname is the DCO. Now, he's the damage control officer because I was always in and out of hot water, and we were known throughout the county and elsewhere as being very unusual detectives on how we investigated our crimes, whether they were robberies, threats, or homicides. In fact, we were so unusual that there was a book written about us called The Duck and the DCO, which is on Amazon. If you're interested in true crime and a lot of cop humor, it's there. The reason I got the name The Duck, like I said, I was always in and out of trouble, but also, you know, it rolls down a duck's back. I never seemed to have issues at the end of what I did, even though I did things extremely different than other detectives did. For example, I would never wear a suit. I hated them. I don't have a suit today. Um, so I would wear a nylon jacket and Levi's, and that's not what a homicide detective wears. You always see them on television, they're always wearing suits. Well, when you're getting involved in a bunch of crap all the time, I'm not going to be wearing a suit and get so you can't even move in, you can't run in them, you can't grab people in them. I'm not doing that, so it's not going to happen. So that's why we have the Duck, because that's my nickname. So now we're over with that. Let's go to there are 3 basic stalking scenarios that I've developed over the years, and other people have as well. And I like to use them. I like to simplify things. So there are a lot of different people that have classified stalkers in a variety of ways, and they're welcome to that. It works for them. That's great. But what works for me is simplicity, because I'm kind of a simple guy, so I kind of like to keep it that way. So, in other words, we have domestic violence or intimate partner stalker, and that's the primary number of stalkers that are out there. I'd say probably 80 to 85% of all stalkers revolve around domestic violence or intimate partner stalking. And then we have a stranger stalking scenario, and then we also have what we call an acquaintance stalking scenario. Now, let's talk about domestic violence and intimate partner. That's pretty straightforward. If you know anything about intimate partner relationships, if you know the definition, you don't have to have a sexual relationship to have an intimate partner relationship. You can have a dating relationship where there's no sex, etc. Oftentimes that doesn't transpire, but it's still listed that way as an intimate partner relationship. And domestic violence speaks for itself. Unfortunately, there's a huge issue with domestic violence throughout any place in the world, and it's growing exponentially, which is a tragic scenario. Um, we need to move on and do better with that kind of an environment. By the way, when we talk about women throughout the course of these segments and stuff, I want to, guys that are out there listening to this, I just thought I'd bring this up right now so you understand better. Um, in my estimation, and most people that are learned, which I don't consider myself to be learned, but most people that are learned realize that, sorry guys, but women are a lot smarter than we are for the most part. And my wife is definitely much smarter than I am. My kids got their smarts from her. They didn't get them from me. So, and I also want you to understand that I am not domesticated. I'm institutionalized, and my wife is the warden. So just keep that in mind. So I don't have a domestic violence situation because my wife would take care of me if we were involved in any kind of situation like that. But it's a tragic that that is out there all the time. So most stalkers come from a domestic violence or an intimate partner relationship. And unfortunately, the stalkers that we deal with on a regular basis that are in that kind of involvement feel that the person that they're going after is the reason that they're being arrested by us or contacted by us, because it's always going to be that other individual's fault, which it isn't. But that's how they feel. They're empowered that way. What we see with intimate partner domestic violence relationships is what I consider to be a schism. In other words, just think about a ball that's together like this, and that's the relationship when it starts out. Everything's wonderful in the world, there's no problems, etc., etc. And then over a period of time, this ball starts to move away, and there's two halves to each ball. So the stalker wants to move that ball back so that there is no more schism. The schism is a separation of these balls, and he wants to move it back. He tries everything in his power to do that. Now, females do stalk men with the same type of outlook. They want to get that relationship back together again. Now, what tools do the stalkers use when they do this? They use a variety of tools, which we'll get into in more depth later. But they will follow, harass, contact the victim's friends, relatives, etc., and to gather information on them. The other thing is that we see is they become, if you're a victim of stalking in this with this particular classification, you already know they become more and more possessive. They want to know where you are, what you're doing at all times, and they don't like it when you're out with friends. They try and eliminate your friends from that relationship because they want to be the only person in your life. Now, for those of you being stalked, does that kind of sound familiar? I bet it does. Now, again, we're not going to go into in depth on each one of these things. We're just going to explain to you that this is one of the things we talk about. This is our primary stalking classification, domestic violence. And then there is the acquaintance type stalker. Now, the acquaintance type stalker is not a dating relationship. It is like you go out with this person maybe as to have coffee or something like that, or you meet this person in a business relationship or a working relationship, because unfortunately we have a ton of workplace violence stalking out there. In fact, we have an entire section on our book that talks about workplace violence and what you can do. The situation is that an acquaintance stalking is not an intimate partner, nor is it a dating relationship, nor is it a domestic violence scenario. It's just somebody that you've encountered. You may have encountered this individual, say, in a supermarket, walking around, and the guy begins to talk to you, or the female begins to talk to you, etc., etc. We had the first stalking civil tort. I wrote part of the brief on that. That was back, I think, in about 1966. A group of attorneys contacted me when I was still working homicide, and they'd heard about me, and they wanted me to help them, and they're willing to pay me in regards to writing this tort. And I said, yeah, well, I'm still working as a cop. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to charge you. So I knew they told me about the victim. I said, okay, she's a victim. I'll help her out. So I wrote part of the brief. And what it was she was working in a supermarket as a supermarket cashier. And this individual would come in on a fairly regular basis in the store, and he tried to start up a conversation with her while she was in the market. And unfortunately, while she was working, and she didn't want to have anything to do with him, she's trying to be nice to him as a customer, and he just continued on and continued on. And then she found he began to follow her home, things of that nature. And then he would try and go into the break room and confront her and talk to her. The suit was because the store would not protect her, would not file a restraining order, a corporate restraining order against this individual, failed to protect when she brought it to their attention on several occasions. So that's what happened, and she actually had the first successful prosecution or civil litigation in regards to that, and received a pretty substantial sum from it because the store neglected to protect her. That's why we're in the process always of training corporate advisors. Remember the people I told you about, ATAP, they do a lot of that as well. They work with corporate supervisors and that type of thing to get teams set up within that corporation to protect and handle problems such as stalking or violence that transpires within the workplace. Now, so we understand that type of stalking is not the same as domestic violence or intimate partner. All right? It's acquaintance. Now let's move on to stranger stalkers. Stranger stalkers can be extremely devastating to the victim because they have no idea who the stalker is. So, let me give you an example. I have a female that comes into her residence, and she works out. She's a workout professional, trains people on body image, etc., etc. She comes into her apartment, and on the television it says, "I saw that bra you wore this morning, and I really liked it." And that was written on her television. Well, you think that might freak her out? Well, yeah, obviously it did. And she had no idea who that individual was. And so when we were presented the case, what we had to do is work the victim backwards because we didn't have any idea who the stalking suspect was. And that's what you do. You surveil the victim, you work any of her associates, etc., etc. It's a process that you have to go through. One example I'll give you is we had a female who worked in a store in a large mall area within our city, and she was getting things hung on her vehicle, on her windshield. You know, like people walk around and go to Joe's Pizza, buy this car, etc., etc. You see that stuff on your car all the time. It's a pain, and just throw it away. Unfortunately, what she was getting was this individual's body parts, photographs, and other things which we won't get into, on her car. And she had absolutely no idea who this guy was or anything else. And so what we did is we set up in the bushes. We set up a surveillance team in the bushes and around this mall, and we watched for 3 or 4 days. And what happened on about the 3rd or 4th day is we saw this individual come up and put these things on her car, and then we took him off and arrested him. And he thought he was having a relationship with this female by doing this, and by going into her store and surveilling her. And after we talked to her for a while and showed her a picture of this individual, she said, "Wow, yeah, I have seen that guy around a lot, but I didn't pay much attention to him. He's never really talked to me or anything." So that's the type of thing that you can see with a stranger stalker. What you have to do is you have to work the victim backwards to find out who the stranger stalker is. And it is an extremely frightening scenario for the victim. Now, those are the 3 basic classifications we use. We use acquaintance stalker, we use domestic violence intimate partner, and we use stranger stalker. Now, we're going to break down the rest of them that we have out there, like campus stalking and that type of thing, but we're not going to do it in this particular segment. And hopefully everybody understands now why they why we are called Duckworks Criminal Consulting, where the heck we got that from. Now you understand that better. All right, till the next time. But